Which one?
Dorsainville?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No problem.
I'm setting up the live link right now on YouTube. Gracias. Going on mute. All right, gracias. The link is yours now. All right, I'm admitting everyone, so we are live. So I give you a second to begin.
My name is Soraya Sinozier. I currently sit on the board of the Association of Haitian Professionals. We are pleased that you can join us for this important discussion, Focus Haiti, Diagnosing Current Situations and Exploring Solutions for Action. AHP welcomes our distinguished guests, beloved members and supporters to lead the discussion. We have panelists from the Haitian community living in Haiti and members of the diaspora. We have with us James Jean-Louis Charles, Dave Fils-Aimé, Emanuela Douillon, Dr. Robert Faton, Monique Kleska, and Sabine Philippe. Because we are such a large group of panelists, I will be displaying their bios as they speak. AHP is hosting this panel in order to discuss current events in Haiti and how the diaspora can support change. We want to make it clear that we're not here to support any political agenda. We want to start a conversation. We will let our panelists speak first and open for questions from the public after. Please raise your hand and feel free to write questions in the chat box if you feel you will forget them. Also, if you feel more comfortable posing your questions in Creole, please do not hesitate to do so. Let's begin. Madame Monique Kleska, from your perspective, please tell us about the current situation in Haiti and some of the challenges that the country is being faced with.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for having invited me. The current situation of Haiti is dire. And I think it is important to know that. The crisis in Haiti is multidimensional and it is pervasive. So every area of life really is impacted by the crisis. And it is a crisis that threatens everything that we know. And because of that, I think when we talk about a political agenda, I will just really kind of do an analysis. Politics is part of it because it is also a political crisis, but it is a much wider crisis than that. And I would say that the crisis really started with the riots in July 2018, when groups of youth took to the streets and they actually started asking for services, there was a lot of call for respect for their dignity, and there was a lot of calls also for jobs, decent jobs. And then a few months later, the Petrocaribe scandal blew in our faces. And then there was a movement for accountability and against impunity in that. So I think one has to look at how it began, and slowly it took over pretty much all of our lives, and it has been exacerbated by the gangs and the whole kidnapping aspect of it. Now, part of the crisis is massive human rights abuses. We have heard of massacres. Recently, the Harvard, in association with the Haitian organizations, have analyzed 3 particular massacres that they consider to be crimes against humanity. We have also arbitrary decrees where government, the president just rules by decree because there is no parliament. There is also, we are in total unconstitutionality. There is, nobody can tell you that the Constitution is being followed because it is not being followed, even though they have not said that the Constitution is at a standstill. And all of it is really with the objective of installing terror. So we are terrified to go out of our houses. We are terrified to do anything, and suppressing our voices, suppressing any voice that is against the regime. We are in the midst of a dictatorship. Whether or not we are talking about political agendas, but the reality of the situation is that we are in a dictatorship where no constitution is being followed, arbitrary rule, and massive human rights abuses. So I think that is very clear, and that has to be said. A lot of our rights are threatened. The right to assemble, when we have tried to assemble, most demonstrations in the last 2 years have been, have ended with, sometimes before they even start, with massive throwing of gas lacrimogène in the tear gas, as they call it. Now, I think one of the things that's important is that when terror is being instilled, there is also trauma. We're traumatized. We're like, you know, kids for a long time, kids couldn't go to school. And even now, there are a lot of children who are not going to school because of the fear of being kidnapped. So I think that is the thing that is very important. Economic activities, a lot of economic activities have come to a standstill because of that also. You find that 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, people are rushing home. Nobody is waiting in the street. So I think that is a very important aspect of the current situation. But I want to mention one thing that is important. People have been taken to the streets to demonstrate for the last 3 years. It goes up and down. Even if you don't see demonstrations, there are militants who are carrying out small actions in various areas in the country. And I think those actions, the mobilization is important. And I think practically every sector in Haiti, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, voodoo practitioners, various sectors, teachers, unions, other types of professionals have spoken out against what is going on. So one thing that I want to be clear about is this is pervasive. and multidimensional. I just want to repeat it so one can understand it is not a political crisis. It is a multidimensional crisis. And in the way that I say pervasive is it affects every aspect of our lives. So what do? And I think very often people are thinking that solutions are about, well, let's put the politicians in a room and resolve the issue. But then my question is, well, what about us? What about the communities? What about the organizations, the civil society organizations? What about the grassroots movements and organizations? What will they say about the crisis? Because as I said, it is not only a politics. Massive inequalities. You have people who are washing their feet in the streets in dirty water. You have people who go to sleep without having eaten. People, as they say, in the case of chaudière pas montée du feu, in one day, sometimes in 2 days. So how are you going to resolve the crisis if politicians get together in a room and then we are not heard? And I think that is the main thing that I want to be clear about today, that you cannot resolve this pervasive multidimensional crisis if you don't listen to the communities, to the other voices that are coming from organizations, from universities, from schools, from the marchand. All of them are saying, we do not want this system anymore where politicians are lying to us, politicians are stealing from us, politicians are killing us. We want change. And in the streets you hear, changer le système. That's what they're talking about, changing the system so that we have a different governance that is about providing services, that is about providing a social justice agenda, healthcare, education, decent jobs. So I am hoping that my voice
I'm going to interrupt you.
as one of those voices from the communities and from civil society and from grassroots organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kliska, for such a wide perspective. I thank you for your intervention. Ms. Emanuela Douillon, from your perspective, what are the current challenges facing Haiti?
Thank you. I want to thank you all for holding this meeting on such an important issue. And as Haitian and Haitian American, we are rightfully deeply concerned about the situation in Haiti, and it's very important that we share our views on the situation in order to find solutions together. I won't repeat what Ms. Kleska just said, and I don't want to add more so that my fellow speakers have enough to say about the crisis. But what I want to point out is that often there is no agreement or a good understanding on what is the root of the problem and the main grievances. And also there is another problem because some political actors and their accomplices, they often promote a distorted narrative and portray the crisis as what Ms. Kleska said, a dispute between politicians. Like it is essentially a political crisis and the main actors are like political actors. This is not what it is. And no crisis is simple, and the one Haiti is facing right now is not different. On top of the political crisis, the economic crisis, there are several accounts of human rights violation, a surge in kidnapping, gang violence, and the overall security situation has worsened. And it's all linked to impunity, which is the main reason there is so much corruption, lack of transparency, and a governance problem. Back in 2018, a movement called Petrol Challenge emerged with two main grievances: government impunity and government corruption. And Haitian youth and civil society, we spent more than 2 years demanding accountability and the prosecution of those charged by the courts of embezzlement and misappropriation of the Petro-Caribbean fund, including the president of the country, Jovenel Moïse. And the response to the nationwide accountability movement has varied. There were attempts to undermine accountability efforts. There are still many attempts to undermine accountability efforts. Violence has been used against protesters. Armed gangs linked to state official massacre civilian. We have the La Salle massacre, for example, and more recently, the one that happened in Bel Air. And besides, the economic situation in Haiti has worsened toward Moise's presidency. And gangs that enjoy the protection of state officials proliferate. This is not a secret that many gangs members in Haiti are linked to some officials. Also, there is a consensus among civil society mainly that Haiti's governmental and judiciary systems are broken and they must be transformed to actually foster social equity and inclusion. And many political actors and civil society organizations are collaborating to define a roadmap for the political transition and as what is needed in terms of accountability. The movement for accountability, either with the People Challenge or with what some other organizations are doing, must continue. It will continue, and it will need to be more organized. Thank you, and I look forward for your questions.
Thank you, Madame Dion. Mr. Fiseme, you recently returned to live in Haiti to dedicate your time to your organization, BAL. What is the current situation from the perspective of the young people you're working with?
Thank you, Soraya, and the whole AHP team for inviting me to be on this panel. It's a pleasure to join you all. Before I get to that aspect of your question, Soraya, just wanted to provide folks with some important statistics regarding the youth in Haiti. So in 1985, we had a population of about 6 million people, and only about 23.4% of Haitians lived in urban areas. We now have a population of 11.5 million people, but 57% of Haitians living in urban areas, and 52% of Haitians are under 25 years old today. So over the past 3 decades, our general population has nearly doubled, and our urban population has actually more than doubled. Unfortunately, over the past couple of decades, our leaders haven't been able to adequately respond to population growth by governing responsibly and implementing public policies to improve the Haitian people's living conditions. And there are 2 urban areas in particular whose current conditions are the direct result of failures of different governments over the past decades, Cité Soleil and Martissa. And these 2 areas actually where my organization, Basketball Poncade La Jeunesse, works. And we currently have a situation right now, as I'm sure everyone knows, where there's widespread gang violence and kidnapping being conducted by these gangs. And a lot of these gangs are based in Martissa in particular. In Martissa, we have a situation right now where we have about 4 major gangs. You have Village de Dieu, which is near the Bicentenaire area. You have Base Pilate, which is in the Bolos area of Martissa. And you also have the Tibois gang, which is in the mountain areas of Martissa. And you also have Galaville, all right? And a lot of these gangs have been actively involved in kidnapping and all sorts of crimes in the country over the past couple of years. And in Cité Soleil, you have 2 main gangs, one being led by a gentleman called Gabriel, and another gang being led by another gentleman called Iska. And not too far from them, you have the Katsamaozo gang. And the thing with these gangs is most of the gang members are between the ages of 18 to 25, from statistics that have been able to be collected regarding these gangs. And we actually had a French priest who was recently kidnapped and released. And from his observation, he said that most of the gang members of the Katsamauzo gang, which had kidnapped him, he believed were between the ages of 18 and 25. So the Haiti that we have today is not the same Haiti that a lot of folks in the diaspora who maybe left the country in the 70s, 80s, or 90s knew. Because again, as I've mentioned, 52% of Haitians are under 25 years old, meaning that they were born in 1997 or later, okay? So there's been a significant shift in the country's demographics. And because the government hasn't really implemented policies to have programs and services for folks living in areas such as Cité Soleil and Matissan, we now have the situation where there's no government presence in these areas, and you have all these gangs being led by young people who are making life hell for most Haitians living in the Port-au-Prince metropolitan area. And that's a situation right now in Haiti, and my organization works in both Matissan and Cité Soleil. And our mission is to use basketball as a way to mentor and educate the youth and to provide them with other programs and services that will keep them away from a life of delinquency and crime.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Jean-Louis Charles, you recently returned to Haiti as well and work with young people. What are the daily challenges that you feel that they are facing?
All right, first of all, the name is James Louis Charles, sorry.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I apologize.
No worries. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with the audience what is happening in Haiti. As my friend just mentioned a few minutes ago, 50% of the population in Haiti is under the age of 25. When I moved back to Haiti a few years ago to run an organization that uses soccer as a means for social change, what I noticed pretty quickly is that I had many young men, mostly young men, who were 21, 22, 23, just hanging around because there was nothing else for them to do. And this, to me, leads me to try to understand the situation in Haiti. And what I noticed is that if you are a young person born in Haiti, you really have two choices. It's either you leave Haiti or you join a gang for the most part. Those are the two choices that you have currently in Haiti. And that to me needs to change. So pretty quickly, I try to convince my organization to provide another pathway for those young men that were a part of my organization. Once that have gone through the organization, because it was an organization for young people between the ages of 8 to 18 years old. I wanted to at least provide them with the education so that they could succeed on their own after they went through the program. So I started on my own to look at different options. I stumbled onto an organization called The Right to Dream. It is an organization that was founded by a Manchester United scout that was sent to West Africa. And when he went to West Africa, sorry, he realized pretty quickly that there's a lot of talent there when it comes to soccer. If only those kids were given the same opportunity to professional training to succeed in soccer. So, which is what he did. He opened his own academy called The Right to Dream. And currently that academy is the model of success for West Africa. I went to Europe and I met with the guy. I was practically begging them to open an academy in Haiti as well, because we all know how crazy soccer is in Haiti. But I must tell you, even though he didn't want to invest in Haiti, but he really gave me the blueprint. And he tells me, if I can get it started, he would support me. So what I really want people to understand is this particular academy, which is now a project that I'm working on, it guarantees two paths to success, which is professional training or to use soccer so that one can be able to get scholarship to go to universities in the States. And all of this also adds onto another part onto another component, which is what they call the character development. The character development component is this idea to create socially focused and purpose-driven leaders that will then give back to their community. Haiti needs such program. Now, as Dave said, 50% of the population is under the age of 25. For me, it almost seems like it's a policy. It's the policy of the Haitian government to let people leave. Because if they stay in Haiti, they are a burden on the government. However, if they leave, they can actually send remittances back home. To me, this is irresponsible of any government to allow such thing to happen. In addition to that, Haitians are going abroad. They're paying hundreds and thousands of dollars every year to get a university education somewhere else. This is money that the Haitian government could have been making in Haiti and put to good use, such as opening universities and provide other opportunities for these young people to succeed in Haiti. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. As I'm working on my project, I'm looking around, I see people that I respect, such as Mr. Professor Robert Fatton and others, I'm sure, who are in the audience. I urge you, if you are please interested in joining me in this endeavor so that we can make Haitian dreams a reality also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James Louis Charles. Dr. Fatton, you're the author of several books on the African experience, notably South Africa and Senegal. You have penned some books on Haiti's political past. As a member of the diaspora and from your unique perspective as a professor of politics and foreign affairs, how do you see the current challenges in Haiti and how did we get there?
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a pleasure, and meeting also people who are in Haiti where the situation is so difficult, and that their own history gives me a lot of hope, actually, that things are not completely lost. Let me say first that at the moment, I don't think we should depend on the international community to change the situation in the country. As far as I'm concerned, the recent past has demonstrated that the international community has not, in fact, contributed to any type of significant development in the country, let alone social justice, and has actually contributed to a model of development that has precipitated that demographic explosion that some of the speakers have been talking about, because we have abandoned the rural areas, and that has meant that people in the rural areas have very little to survive on, and they move to the cities. And unfortunately, in the cities, you have no jobs. And as one of the speakers suggested, this is a tragedy for the youth, because he put it very bluntly: either you join a gang or you exit. And clearly, your country cannot live on that particular choice. This is a choice of despair. So the first thing I think is that we need to really believe that the solution has to be done in Haiti by Haitians and by the support of the Haitian community. But the real struggle is in Haiti itself. And I think we need to have a new state, a state that is perceived by the vast majority of the population as legitimate. On the other hand, as we know, we have a really systemic crisis at the moment. So how do we construct that new legitimate state given the current predicament? And as far as I'm concerned, if you want any type of legitimate state in Haiti, the first thing that you need to have on both those who rule and those who are opposed to the rulers is indeed an acceptance that their own selfish corporate interests do not prevail. And that is a very difficult thing to generate. But I think the very conditions of the crisis now offer an opportunity. The crisis is not only the generation of morbid symptoms, violence, and dangers. It is also an opportunity to turn, as it were, in a different direction. And what I would suggest is that at the moment, it is really a very bad idea to have sorry? Can you hear me? I'm not sure that. Okay, I will continue. I thought someone was asking a question. So what I was suggesting is that at the moment, in my humble opinion, I think it's a real mistake to go ahead with a referendum and with elections this year. I think both events would exacerbate the crisis. And in fact, as Monique has put it, the Constitution of 1987 has been violated consistently. So why would a new constitution create a new beginning? In fact, the problem with the constitution, the existing constitution, is precisely that it has been continuously violated by international actors and internal actors, both the government, the opposition, and the international community. And as we know, changing a constitution, given the zero-sum politics of Haiti, would not necessarily transform politicians into Democrats. In fact, as we know, with the traditional Haitian proverb, Constitution c'est papier, mais baïonnette c'est fait. So I don't think the problem is in the Constitution per se. So how do we get to a different dispensation in the country? I think what is needed now is a historic compromise that would generate a government of national unity composed of individuals and civic organizations that are not immediately concerned about the immediate political futures of their own corporate interest. We need a government of national unity composed of those individuals, and that government of national unity would serve for probably 2 or 3 years, and then we could have elections and we could think about reconstituting the constitution itself, but it has to be done on the basis of the law of the country. We cannot have a new constitution by rejecting the current constitution. This is a terrible beginning. So we need to be extremely careful about changing the constitutions and having elections in a climate of generalized insecurity and with logistical supports that virtually do not exist. So we need to rethink that. But in order to rethink that, we need, in fact, a real shock to the system. In other words, how do we generate a movement that would do simultaneously 2 things? One is to ask the current government and the current president to withdraw from power. And on the other hand, the traditional political parties to accept that compromise, whereby they would be put on the sideline, at least for 1 or 2 years, and generate that kind of national unity, whereby the country could rethink its constitution, could rethink its model of development, and integrate into that rethinking all of the civic organizations. If we do not do that, I'm really genuinely afraid that what we are going to get is a descent into chaos, and we are going to see the international community, and particularly the United States, France and Canada and the OAS intervene again in Haiti, and the result, I'm afraid, will be a repeat of past failures and the total surrender of Haiti's sovereignty. So I think the choice is very stark. We are at a crossroad. And if we don't have that kind of historic compromise, I think we are really in a very, very dangerous moment that could lead to chaos and complete civic breakdown. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Papon. Ms. Sabine Philippe, as a member of the diaspora, you felt compelled, given the current situation in Haiti, to take action. Tell us why and how you see the current challenges.
Thank you for your question, Soraya, and thank you for having me in this panel of very prestigious people. I am, in fact, very concerned with what's going on in Haiti as well. And Haiti is basically stuck. So the march is the first step to move forward. And it is a moral and ethical. It is a moral. There is some. I think it's.
Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Please go ahead, Sabine. We'll try to fix the problem.
Okay, very good. So basically, it's an oral and ethical obligation of the diaspora to get involved right now in the problems of Haiti. I want to say that the march is a non-political movement. We are not affiliated with any political party. We are an organic movement, self-financed, whose mission is to, it's more of a social mission towards Haiti. So we feel that law and order must be established in Haiti. There must be justice, and the culprits must come to terms with their actions. And at that point, we can talk about unity, reconciliation, so that we can have a better Haiti, like all of you have suggested in this panel. We also need government transparency. The wealth of Haiti must be used for the country, not for somebody's pocket. All Haitians must benefit from the wealth of Haiti. We also feel that the system of government is totally corrupt, needs to be changed. Social exclusion must stop. We also need to have social equality. We're not saying that everybody must be rich, but everybody should be given the opportunity to have a decent life. Kids must go to school. People must be able to go to work. The country must be able to absorb competence and talents and people coming from all over, because a lot of us outside and we have a lot to offer. The country must be open for real business. We need investors to come to Haiti to create jobs. We don't want to have to pay somebody the pot de vin in order to start even a social program in Haiti. So those are the reasons why we want to march. We want to march to denounce the violence in Haiti, the dictatorship, the corruption, the violations of human rights, and the international interference and dominance in Haiti's affair. It is time that us Haitian, both from the diaspora as well as inside of Haiti, take matters into our hands. This is our problem. This is our country, and we must come together in unity to solve the problem. It is time for us to take the country back. It is time for us to bring our sovereignty forward. It is time for us to establish respect and to stop being betrayers, corrupt individuals, irresponsible people, especially in the governments of Haiti. Now, when we're going to march, we'll make sure that all those are very well established, and we will demand that we sit at the table for all the decisions that must be taken about Haiti going forward. We were out, they told us Diaspora Paladon. In Haiti, that was the motto, Diaspora Paladon. We have decided this time that we are in it, et nous la donne net. C'est pays nous tout. This is our own country as well, whether we are outside or inside. We only have one country, and that country is Haiti. Now, let's talk about some solutions. My solution.
We're going to delve into the question of solutions.
Yeah, 30 seconds, and I will give you my solutions, meaning not solutions, but those are open-ended solutions that I'm proposing. Haiti is a very rich country. How come nobody's turning around and look at all those riches that we have and exploit them? We have all the natural resources. We have beaches. We have the historical monuments. We have art. We have our culture. Nobody's turning around and say, hey, wait a minute, let's focus on exploiting those and give opportunity to Haitians to have a job or to have investors come to Haiti. That's my first question. Why aren't we looking at those opportunities? Number two question is an open-ended question as well. Why can't we have security in Haiti so that people can go about their business? And my third question is, why don't we take matters into our hands and tell the US, the UN, the OAS, and the call group, back off? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Philippe. Thank you to all our panelists. Before we open up questions from the audience, we wanted to look at one more question. A lot of you alluded to that. What is the way forward? Can the issues currently facing Haiti be resolved only by Haiti with Haiti-led initiatives? Is international support needed? And how do you see the role of the diaspora? If somebody wants to take the lead with that question. Anyone?
Well, I think I would like to comment on this. And it was a long question. I'm afraid I missed some point. You mentioned.
Let me break it down.
Yeah.
I want to explore what the way forward is, the issues that we're currently facing. Dr. Fatom, Madame Kliska also talked about solutions. Are these solutions, can they be resolved by Haiti and Haiti-led initiatives only? Do we want to have international support? Is international support needed? And how do you see the role of the diaspora? You don't have to answer all of the things, but there are some things you can allude to.
I know. I think the key word here is Haiti-led, Haitian-led. We will definitely need the support of our friends, and support means support. There must be some boundaries. There is a limit as to what another country can do for us. And like I said before, the keyword is Haitian-led. We have to find the solution for ourselves. We have to promote it. We have to decide by ourselves. But we need to be able to count on the support of other country. And I don't know, I was shocked when I listened to the last speaker, I think it was Madame Philippe, when she mentioned that people were saying that diaspora paladin. I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that people used to say things like this. And we count on the diaspora for the remittances, the money that they send home, even if it's not used like it could be used. As an economist, I'm really saddened by the fact that most of this money is used to buy products that are imported, and it's only used for consumption. And at the end of the day, it's not invested, and it's not creating wealth, and it's not really helping to develop the country. We are using it to survive. This is a talk for another time, but we definitely need to count on the diaspora. We need their expertise, we need their investment, and we need them because it's also their country, and there is no way anyone will say that the diaspora doesn't have their word in the solution. They are part of the solution, and we definitely need both the diaspora and our friend, but any solution has to be Haitian led, and we need to be able to decide for ourselves.
Thank you, Ms. Duyon. Does anybody else want to tackle this question?
Yeah, I wanted to perhaps tackle this heavy question, several questions, in fact. I think one of the things that to me is extremely important is in Haiti, we have to be able to speak with one voice in terms of when we face the outside world. And I think one of the big problems we've had is we have really lost our, we're under control. We are under control of the United States and the international community. And a lot of it is some control that we have given up to them also. And I think part of what is important is to make sure that by hearing all of the different Haitian voices that I talked about, from communities, from grassroots organizations, from organized civil society, from what all the citizens, message becomes legitimate also because of the different people who are carrying that message in terms of the social agenda, the inequalities that must stop, the governance that must change. So I think that is something that is important. And by getting together and tying ourselves together in a sense, you have that union fait la force, regardless of the fact that politicians may be fighting. Politicians, they have different agendas and they fight. I think in every country in the world, you have politicians who have different stands. The big issue is that here they are stealing us massively, they are killing us massively, and they're not listening to what we are demanding. So one of the big aspects is getting together, putting these voices together so that we can be taken in a legitimate manner and we can, in a certain manner, regain a certain sovereignty so that when we talk to others, who are some of us are our friends, but friends who kind of invade your home. And I think that's the problem. We want our home vacated by these friends, and we want to be able to run our homes. And one example that I will give before I handle the aspect of diaspora is with the elections. Haitians are asking for time so that the security situation can be under control. Right now, we are not being protected by the state. We are not being protected by the police.
Madam Kliska, your video is
etc. So,
Madam Kliska, your video is coming in and out.
I'm sorry about that.
No, Madam Kliska,
sorry about that.
if I may interject, Madam Kliska,
yes.
If I may interject, just turn off your video. It could be the bandwidth. You don't have enough bandwidth in Haiti. Just turn off the video and just speak from the voice only.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes. So to finish this part, what I was saying is in terms of regaining our sovereignty, I think getting all these voices together, putting together what are the demands of the Haitian people? What is it that we want? We are saying that we do not want elections right now. We do not want a referendum. And whether it's political or not, right now in Haiti, you can't go anywhere. Everyone is stuck in their home early in the day because of the kidnapping wave, the killings, etc. So we cannot, the security situation does not allow for that right now. Why is it that our friends elsewhere are saying you should go to elections right now? They are sending us to be killed. And so I think that is a message. And that is to answer the part about the diaspora. I think that's where the diaspora can write to their and to carry that message, to tell them, no, our families, friends are not safe. We want elections, but not now because they are not feasible, one. Secondly, if you have people who have stolen $4 billion from you, do you want to go to elections with them? Come on, I mean, it's common sense. Somebody is stealing $4 billion from you and you're going to say, okay, let's go to elections with them. It's going to be honest. Come on, common sense. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's the message that diaspora can do. Keep up the pressure on your congressman, on your congresswomen, on Anthony Blinken, on Biden, on Joe Biden, on Kamala Harris, to say that Haitian lives matter. So stop putting their knees on our necks and let us breathe. Let us carry forward with our agenda, which is social justice, which is democracy, and which is clean government. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kliska. We'll close out this question with Ms. Philippe, followed by Dr. Faton, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya, for giving me the time. Yes, I'm going to touch upon very briefly the 4 aspects of this question. The first question was, what is the way forward? Well, the way forward is to now include competence into the decision-making of Haiti. We have a superstructure. The suprastructure is outside of the country at this time. They need to get involved in decision-making about Haiti. They also, whatever is left in Haiti of the suprastructure, because I'm not going to say that there aren't some in Haiti, but they must be come forward as well, and their competency, their talent should be used. This mediocrity in Haiti, anybody who can lead the country with no moral value, no background, no vision, and no plan directeur, that stuff got to stop. So that's the first thing I'm going to say about the way to move forward. We need to value competency, and we need to say bye-bye to mediocrity. The second question had to do, is it a solution that has to come from Haitians? Absolutely. We did in 1804, we can do it again. The solution is our solution together. We created the problems. The betrayers created the problems. The irresponsible created the problems. The incompetent created the problems. Therefore, they have to salvage it, and together we have to resolve the problem. In terms of international help, no way, Jose. Si vous regardez le bilan du pays, this is their fault. This is our fault too, parce que cabrit gade met kay avant yo entrer, right? That's what the proverb says. So if we did not allow them to get involved in our things, in our affairs, we wouldn't be here today. So I am absolutely against this dominance, because that's what caused us the problem we are facing currently. So the last question was in terms of what is the role of the diaspora? Well, Dr. Faton said it before. He said that the diaspora has to become one voice. And this is what this march is going to establish. We are going to become this one voice. Like the Jewish people, they are one voice, and they close this country for holidays. I'm not pretending that's what we're going to do. However, when we become one voice and we bring forward our problems in the open so that the world can see, they will listen to us. We don't want people to take decision for us. We can take our own decision by becoming that one voice. Okay, so this is what I was going to say. When Madame Kliska suggested that we must put pressure on our congressmen, that's not a congressman issue. Haiti is the problem. We are the problems. We have to solve the problems with the superstructure, the competence that we have, because as you see outside, all the competence, Haitian competence outside is making the world a better place. Why can't we do it in Haiti? That's all I have to say.
Okay, I think we have certain contradictions in our relationship with the external powers. If you look at, even in Haiti, people are calling to the OAS, the United States, not to do that or do that. So there is a reality that we cannot ignore, that the country is so totally dependent on external sources of power, of finance, that the politicians themselves, their very survival is dependent also on foreign assistance. The civil society organizations, many of them get their funds from the external arena. So we have that tension between our genuine desire to establish our independence, and yet we have the reality that we are economically, politically, extremely dependent on those forces. That's one problem. The second problem is obviously that we have the big elephant, and that's the United States. And the United States, whether you like it or dislike it, looks at the Caribbean, and Haiti is a member of the Caribbean, literally as what they call it, their backyard. So we have to realize that. So how do we negotiate those problems? It's extremely difficult. I would wish that we could have some sort of magical solution whereby the foreign powers disappear and that we can reestablish our independence, but it's not going to happen because we want it. This is something that has to be gained. And we can remember, for instance, during the presidency of Préval, how difficult it was for Préval to get the money that degenerated in corruption, the petrodollars, because of strategic consideration of the United States and Venezuela. So we can't ignore those things. But I think there is something that can happen within Haiti that could push the government and the opposition into a compromise. They need to be compelled to do it. And what Monique Lescar was saying is that in spite of the dictatorial authoritarian nature of the current regime, we still have protests. We still have an undercurrent coming from the population and civic organization to change things. And that, to me, is that force that can lead to that compromise whereby the existing politicians and the government would simultaneously, at least for a period of time, exit the arena of power, and we could have a government of national unity with the civic organizations, the grassroots organizations, reorganizing society before we have an election, let alone a change in the constitution. As to the diaspora, unfortunately, I don't think we have much power because we don't have the organization and we don't have the reach, for instance, that the Jewish community has. And I personally, I don't think necessarily that the people in Haiti lack the education. I think the system eats you. I remember when Duvalier fell, I know a lot of people who went back to Haiti with all kinds of degrees. They were extremely qualified. But once you enter that political machine, things start to get very complicated. You know, you get into a system that is very corrupt. And if you are not corrupt, you are looked as an idiot. And this is the system itself. It's not necessarily the individual. And this is very problematic. I don't think that corruption is necessarily the worst problem that Haiti faces either. I mean, if you look, for instance, at countries that have industrialized very quickly, like the South Koreas and the Taiwans, at the beginning, they were so totally corrupt. They were basket cases, and then they managed because the government was reestablished, there was a state structure, and eventually that state structure institutionalized certain fundamental principles on which the problems of the progress, economic progress was possible. We don't have that in Haiti. We need a very different kind of structure. We don't have a state. I mean, people were talking about the gangs. How can you have a state if the state can't even control part of your capital city? I mean, I remember watching the news and you have parliament. Parliament can't even get together because it's in a so-called red zone and you have gangs. The National Palace is a mile away from the so-called red zone again. So you have a state that does not exist. What you have is a state that is completely eviscerated by the economic policies of the international community. How do we change that? Is extremely complicated, but I think there can be an opportunity here because we have a crisis. But crises don't necessarily lead to the desired outcome. I remember that after the earthquake, I said, we've reached bottom. If we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? And we missed that opportunity. And we surrendered to the international community. And we ultimately lost whatever limited sovereignty we may have had. And I hope that this time we don't do that. But what I'm saying is that it's a very complicated process. There is no magic wand. And the efforts have to come from the grassroots. And I think in Haiti itself, to force actually the opposition, the traditional political opposition, the government out of the centers of power. But that's a very difficult thing. And I'm talking, I'm in the United States, comfortably seated here. And in some ways, it's unfair to ask Haitians in Haiti to do it alone. But I'm not quite sure that I have a solution on how to regroup the diaspora and give that kind of massive assistance that people in Haiti have. So I think when we are in the diaspora in particular, we have to look at the situation with great humility because we are not really constrained by the problems of Haiti itself. We are not facing that kind of fear that, for instance, Monique Liska is saying. And we are certainly not in conditions of poverty where the outcome, as I think it was James Louis Charles who said that the solution is a gang or exit. So we are at a crossroad and we have to be careful. It's not an easy solution and we have many contradictions at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fetal. Emanuela, I see your hand. I'd like to open it up to the floor. If people who have questions, please raise your hand and pose them. No one has any questions? Go ahead, please.
Hello. It's not a question. Basically, I would like to say thank you for all the panelists addressing the crisis in Haiti. But I think although a lot of people mention about the problem, as a trained criminologist, I tend to focus on the cause of the problem. In my opinion, there's two major issues in Haiti. There's a political crisis, and you can put there's a security crisis tied to, again, to political crisis. So in order to approach the issue right now, we have to go all the way back. So we don't have time for that. I would start with 1987 with the Nouvelle Haiti by the birth of the Haiti Constitution. And I think the source of the issue we have now is the fact that after we have the Haitian Constitution that pretty much have a birth of democracy, we left the democracy in the hands of politicians and politics. So the organized group, civil society, pretty much give up on democracy. They no longer fight again. So they no longer organize again to make sure in a real democracy, you don't have only the court, the parlement, or if I want to speak in French, le parlement, la présidence, ou la justice. La société civile est aussi une force afin que la démocratie soit effective. In Haiti, people talking about Dr. Fatten mentioned that he doesn't believe that the people in diaspora can do anything. We can do anything. We can do a lot. But if we give up, like having that conversation today is a part of the process. Having a March protest on the 18th is a part of the process. So to conclude, I would say that we do have a crisis. We have a sort of dictatorship in Haiti. And because of we have give up in democracy ourselves, the economy of the country is not democratized. Only five family can import rice. So in order to have democracy, all the institutions, including organized group, need to be democratized themselves. Political system in Haiti are not democratized. The court system, the institution, the school, every institution you can print on are not democratized. If you have a group of organized group not democratized, you can't expect democracy to be successful. Having said that, moving forward is not, we're gonna resolve that issue today. It should be ongoing process for days, for years to come. And with that, and I think I'll conclude my comment. So that's what I want to say. And I think that conversation should be ongoing conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Mr. Raymond, you have your hand up. Awad Raymond, please go ahead.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Soraya. Dr. Faton, you mentioned that we are at the point where we need an historic compromise, and where individual and civic organization and should not be concerned with their self-interest. Given the state that we are now and the state of governance and lack of accountability in Haiti, who do you think could lead the transition, so to speak, that we're talking about now?
Should I try to answer that, or do we take other questions?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, let me just say one thing first. I'm not suggesting that the diaspora can do anything. I'm just suggesting that the diaspora's power is very limited in terms of organization, in terms of changing the situation externally. That's all I'm saying. And I'm all for organizing the diaspora. The second question is the business about the historic compromise. And here I think that we should not underestimate the power of civil society in Haiti. I mean, when you look, for instance, at the Petro-Caribe protest, they were massive and the youth was present. They were organized. The problem, obviously, is that when you're dealing with a repressive government, it is very difficult to sustain that activity. And it is very difficult also to sustain those activities, given that the government can not only repress, but it can also co-opt some members of those organizations. And I think this is what I've called that belly politics. In other words, politics in Haiti is a business. This is where people make money because we don't have any productive capacity apart from a very small elite. So therefore, you enter into politics and you use your position, your political position, to enrich yourself. Now, how do you extricate yourself from that situation? And what I'm suggesting is that the only way I can think about it is by protest on the part of the civic organizations in Haiti. This is complicated, it is difficult, but those are the ones that can push the government to move out. We can remember that's what happened, for instance, from 1984 to 1986 with Duvalier. There were massive protests. At one point, the government has to give. And you have that possibility because we have a crisis which is so acute that people in Haiti, I think, have reached the bottom. So there is, in some fundamental ways, nothing to lose now to push for a dramatic transformation of the country again. Now, as I've said, talking from the United States, it's easy to say, and it's a very complicated process in Haiti, but I don't see any other solution. Otherwise, what we will get is a repeat of the past. The international community coming back, the OAS, police from the United Nations, the same old stuff, and nothing fundamentally will alter that reality. This is why I'm talking about the solution coming from Haiti, coming from grassroots organizations and the people who are challenging the system itself. And Monique Lesca has mentioned those organizations. It's a difficult struggle, but this is the way out.
Thank you. Emanuela, I believe you had your hand up earlier. If you want to address your question, please go ahead, and then we'll circle back to Gilles, that I think had some questions too for the panelists.
It's okay. I think that most of what I was going to say, Mr. Faton addressed it. I was basically going to say that the problem in Haiti is not a problem of competency. It's not that we do not have enough qualified people. We do have many qualified people, not enough probably, but we have a lot. Actually, in this government, there is one PhD, like a couple of people have PhDs and are qualified and they work in the National Palace. Yet they are taking a lot of bad decisions, and a lot of people in Haiti who are qualified are also corrupt. And there is not much we can expect from this kind of people. Also about the diaspora, we experienced something back in after 2020, after 2010, after the earthquake, during Martelly's term in Lamotte. Many Haitians from the diaspora came to Haiti. I was so happy to see that, but I was quickly very disappointed because they came here and they did worse than some Haitian here. They only costed more money because they knew what a decent salary was, and they get paid a lot of US dollars, living lavish lifestyle in Haiti, hanging out with the expat, and most of them did no good. We really have a corruption problem here, and it will take more than qualified people. We also need serious people and enough a good institution and rules to keep them accountable. Otherwise, we will be disappointed with all those qualified people who will come here and do nothing.
Thank you, Emanuela. Gilles, you had a few questions. Did you want to go ahead, please?
Sure. Thank you, Soraya, for giving me the opportunity. So this question is in response directly to mentioning of OAS by Dr. Professor Faton. Currently, there is an OAS mission. Apparently, either the government inquired for them to come or they inquired to the government, but we're not clear on how it was played out in the Permanent Council of the OAS. But nonetheless, they are planning to come to Haiti. Does Dr. Faton believe there is a response that organized concerned citizens in Haiti should be prepared to address to them when they come in? How does he see that strategically or tactically that could play out to the benefit to some of the solutions he mentioned earlier in terms of the civil society making more inroads in this opportunity that's on the horizon?
I'll let first Sabine answer because she had a hand raised, so I'll let her go first, and then I'll try to answer Gilles' question about the OAS.
Actually, you can go ahead. This is not what I was going to answer. I was actually going to add to a previous discussion, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to monopolize the microphone. Well, what we hear from the government and members of the opposition is that the foreign powers should not intervene, but they are continuously at the same time calling for the OAS, calling from the United States, calling from the French, calling from the European community to do something. So there is, as I've said, a contradiction. I'm always worried about the role of the OAS in Haiti. I mean, if anyone has read what the Brazilian official Stuytenfus has written about their role, it is a very mischievous role. On the other hand, if we do not have that historic compromise, I think we are headed for the same type of intervention again, that the OAS will go to Haiti, they'll come with new police, new military, and we will be, in fact, under, a tutelage of the international community. And I think a crisis is something that many people can actually benefit from because new jobs are created, new money would come, etc. But I'm worried that the OAS might come in order to organize a referendum and elections. And I think this is a crazy idea. How can you have a referendum? you don't even know. The referendum is in June. We don't even know what is going to be the question. The constitution that we have now has been violated consistently, and you want to replace it by violating the existing constitutions. And the elections in the current climate of gang activities, insecurity, and no logistical really organization for proper elections, having them now is nonsensical. So I hope that if the OAS comes in Haiti, and this is where maybe the diaspora could come in, is to really push the OAS in a position where they say election at this very moment are not a good idea, that the money that is going to be used for those elections should not be used. But on the other hand, the OAS has its own particular strategic considerations. So I don't think we have much power to do something about the OAS, especially if the government and the traditional oppositions are going to talk to them. What are they going to talk to them about? And we don't know. There are all kinds of, ça nous c'est pas ça, as they say in Creole. And what the government says, what the opposition says is not very clear at all, how they want to deal with the international community. But if the OAS comes in with a plan, I think we're in trouble. This is the past, and the past will be repeated.
Thank you. We'll follow by Ms. Philippe, who has her hand up, followed by Shelda, who has a question on the chat, and then Mr. Defiseme.
Thank you, Soraya. What I wanted to say, I want to go back to the issue of competence that Dr. Faton brought up and a couple of other people. I'm not saying there isn't competence in Haiti, but whatever little amount of competence that we have in Haiti is unfortunately demonized and ridiculed. Now, why are we going to talk about competence when we see the repertoire of leaders that have been governing in Haiti? Why didn't this competence file some type of legal action to prevent those irresponsible people or non-competent people, okay, to come to the highest position in the country? The other question I have is, okay, there's competence in Haiti. The diaspora, a lot of competent diaspora came in Haiti, and I believe Emanuela said she was very happy to see that happened. And but then we know what the history was. Well, maybe those competence that came from the diaspora were not the right ones. Have we ever thought about that? Because I'm a strong believer that if you have strong ethical values and strong moral values, you will not let any system corrupt you. It only took 10 people to make a change in the world. So if those people that are the competence coming from the diaspora are fighting against the corruption, I believe we can make a step forward. And I'm going to tell you, I am one of these people that will not allow any corruption to manipulate me, or I would never be bought by anybody. And I believe in the diaspora, there's a lot of people like me. And that's why we're doing the march. So when people tell me there's competence in Haiti, or the competence coming from diaspora, they're giving us a bad name, because that's not what competence does. Competence takes their talent and they rule well. So that's all I wanted to say. So to me, the competence in Haiti is almost null. I'm sorry to say that, but this is what comes out of the story that we see now.
Thank you. Shelda, please.
Hi, everyone. Well, I think I posted my questions on the chat. Just wanted to thank everyone for this platform and also your courage, especially those who return to Haiti to try to contribute to meaningful change. But the question I had is, do we want change? And if we do, what are we doing about it? How are we acting on it? So the first question I had, first of all, I believe that we do need a Haitian solution to the Haitian problem, but how are we going to implement that solution? How are we going to implement that change in our system when those who are supposed to enforce it, they are the one benefiting from it? the way it is right now. So do those people want change? Believe it or not, these people, they are far more than us, than the few of us who want that change. And when you come and try to implement it, they will tell you, they will give you 100 millions of reasons why it's not going to happen. It's not going to succeed. So how do we tackle that problem? So we need to go to the root cause of the problem. And it's a simple exercise. Just take, for example, one institution in Haiti that's not functioning well. Like if you need a service in Haiti, you just walk to the door and you don't even know where to begin. And you start being apprehended by people and telling you that they can help you do things if you pay them. But there is no system in place. And oftentimes, like, you have to go through these people because you need your thing done. But how do we change that? Do we have a plan? What is the plan? I'm a very solution-oriented person, and I've heard everything you've said. They are really great, but I would love to hear, like, what plan do we have at the macro level and also at the very micro level? Do we have a proposal? And if yes, what support do we need to implement it, to implement that plan? So I would like to send the question back to you because I would love to hear those solutions and how they would work, because I believe we all know what needs to be done. Currently, people cannot breathe in Haiti because of the insecurity. What can we do about it? What is the plan? We know the problem now. We have identified it, and the problem identified is half solved. Now, the question is, how do we tackle that problem? Do we have a contingency plan? When people will come you that this solution will not work, what are you going to tell them? Like A, B, C, D, what is the plan? I think that this is what I would love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to follow with Dave Fils-Aimé, then Sophia Kola. And I think Madame Kliska wanted to take a shot at answering Shelda's question. We'll then follow by Phil Julien. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. So I just wanted to make a comment regarding the OAS. Sorry, I have some background noise. I'm in Haiti, a lot of motorcycles. So the OAS, although there might be a particular mission coming in from DC, they actually have a permanent mission based in Haiti, led by a special representative of the Secretary General of the OAS in Haiti, Cristobal Dupuy. And so their mission in Haiti, they meet with the government frequently, and had been supporting the government with the referendum, in particular with getting the national IDs that are made by ONI for folks to vote in the referendum, and also for the elections that the government is hoping to organize. But most recently, both the OAS and also the UN mission in Haiti, BNU, they've expressed their concerns regarding the fact that the process that the government has engaged in to propose this new constitution hasn't been inclusive enough. So we hope that they'll officially remove their support for this illegal process, and that the government will make the sensible decision and not move forward with this referendum in June.
Thank you, Dave. Sophia, please go ahead.
Thanks, Soraya. And I just want to say thank you to the panelists for taking time to speak with everyone today. My question is really for anyone on the panel, but also specifically for people living in Haiti or who have lived in Haiti. I mean, based off of the conversation, I think there's a general consensus that the like original social contract or basic social contract between the people and the government of Haiti, as well as the government within, as well as the factions within the government, is broken. But I was really just wondering, is there sentiment on the ground from the people of Haiti, or I should say, is there a level of confidence in various like social grassroots organizations or leaders that could potentially serve the role, the type of role that has been talked about here, such that they would be able to gain enough power and confidence from the people to ask the government, which folks have kind of, agreed in general that it's corrupt, ask them to step aside, but then also do that next step of really just reimagining the government as a whole. And if there are, could you just throw out maybe a few names of key figures in grassroots orgs? And this is coming from somebody, I live in the United States. I mean, I travel to Haiti every once in a while, but I was really just interested in hearing just some specific names or organizations that folks were thinking about in that way.
Thank you, Sophia. Madame Kleska, did you want to take a chance to address two of those questions? We can follow by other panelists.
Yes, thank you, Soraya. I wanted to respond to a few things, and particularly, I forget the name of the lady who was talking about what is the plan and the root causes.
Shelda.
Sorry?
Her name is Shelda.
Shala, thank you very much. I think in my presentation, I talked about some of the root causes. I talked a lot about inequality. Perhaps I didn't mention the word poverty, but poverty is certainly one of the root causes of a lot of the problems in Haiti. And the poverty in itself is very pervasive, and the inequality is also, there is a wide gap between the very rich and the very, very poor. I think also there has been a lack of investment in human capital. There's been a lack of investment in the health centers, in quality education. And I think what some of the tigers in Asia have shown us is that investing in human capital, particularly health and education, is certainly a key to development of the country. So I think these are some of the issues. There is also another issue that we have had over the last few years, is that the government that is supposed to protect you is the government that is doing violence against you. The police that is supposed to protect you is the police that is violent against you. So you also have these things that are happening. Now, in terms of the insecurity, I don't think it's as simple as, well, what is the plan in terms of insecurity? I think it was David who mentioned that over 50%, it's actually 54% of Haitians are under 24 years old. And when you don't have a system where there is such pervasive poverty, where it's easy to give a gun to someone and tell him, well, go out there and get some money and whatever. And we've seen that in other areas throughout the world. So it is, there are parallels that can be drawn with terrorism in the Sahel, for example, with what is going on in terms of the gangs in Haiti. So there is no future. There is nothing that is looking like it's going to change for you. So I think these are some of the social issues that are pervasive, that are root causes of a lot of what is going on. So I think in terms of just give me a plan, it's not as easy as that. Now, the second part is that I think people have ideas in terms of what must be done. And I think in going around talking to different people, and even in the demonstrations, people are telling you, we want decent jobs, we want to live with dignity, we want healthcare, we want education. It's very clear. I mean, it's being articulated since 2018 for the last 3 years what people want, in addition to a clean government. Now, one of the plan is that once the president that is there now leaves office by force or whatever, that there can be what is called a national conference. It's actually a large kind of chita parler, chita tende in various parts of Haiti. And it has been done in other places that I know of, a conférence nationale, where people can actually articulate, the people can actually articulate very clearly what are their needs, how do they see Haiti in the next 10 to 20 years. So it's not about me saying I have a plan, it is about listening to Haitians and what they're saying, and then putting together different plans based on the needs, based on the interest, based on the aspirations of the Haitian people. And I think these are at least some of the things that I am hearing from various sectors. Their need for justice. The justice system is totally broken in Haiti, and there is a need for justice. And there is also a need for some of the trials to be held, particularly Petro-Caribe, but also some of the massacres that have been going on in Haiti. Just two things before I close off. The issue of competency. I am frankly very tired of people thinking that people in Haiti are stupid or everybody brilliant has left. Please stop. We have to stop this masochism. No, there are people in Haiti who are very competent in all fields. I'm not saying that it is sufficient to move the country forward, but please, let's stop thinking that all the competencies are abroad. It is a false narrative, and let us not fall into that. Now, in terms of the diaspora, yes, I think there are lots of human resources, competent human resources in the diaspora that can come help, whether it be, for months, for weeks, or maybe move back as David has done and as Monsieur, I think Jean-Charles has done. So I think that is very true. Now, just one aspect in the diaspora, when I mention in response to a question, what is it that the diaspora can do? I said very clearly that I believe that the diaspora can put pressure on their congressmen and congresswomen and on their elected officials so that they can really listen to the voices coming from Haiti saying, let us decide for ourselves what is the way forward. Stop telling us we should have elections in 2021 when we are being killed by even going to the bank, by going to the school and everything else. That is the point that I'm making. So I want that to be retained, that the diaspora can have a role in helping shape policy on the other side, but the decisions must be made here because we are sovereign. Even though we have lost some of our sovereignty, we are trying extremely hard with this. And just in conclusion, if this crisis is not resolved, you can have elections today. It will be like putting a Band-Aid on someone who is comatose. The person will die and you will have a Band-Aid on them. This is a major crisis. This has been a long time brewing. So you have to resolve that major crisis of pervasive poverty of pervasive inequality and massive human rights violations in a sick and corrupt governance system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Kliska. Mr. Faton, did you want to address Sophia Cola's question?
Well, I think that Monique has dealt with the question very well.
Okay, perfect.
So I don't really have much to add to it.
Thank you. Okay, we have Phil Julien, followed by Matt Fenelon. Phil? Julien?
Oh, sorry about that. I thought I had unmuted myself.
No problem.
Thank you for allowing me the little bit of time to speak. I'm not going to take too long. I hear the many different ideas and have been reading the chat as well as being actively engaged in the chat also. I see Sabine's plan. I think it's awesome. There are a number of different things that she wrote that made me think of CARICOM being involved in helping Haiti, because a lot of them will probably find themselves in the same predicament one time or another. But my statement is that I think there's going to be nothing's going to happen peacefully. There's going to be for change to actually happen in Haiti. There will be bloodshed. There will be those that want to retain power so much so that they are willing to cut their nose off to spite their face. So this is something that we must be prepared for. I mean, it's just inevitable. It's human nature. I was deployed to Haiti in 2004 as a Marine, and I, witnessed different things. I heard different things. I saw different things happen. And since then, I've gone back and forth to Haiti, stayed at my family's house, and have been involved. But what I saw while I was on active duty, and what I've learned afterwards, and during reading, research, speaking to different people, the bottom line remains is that the person on the ground is and it's somebody that wrote this in the chat as well. They're just surviving. Survival is key in Haiti. Once you survive to the next day, you're golden. And then you just look forward to doing it to the next day and the next day after that. Surviving is not an afterthought. This is something that needs to fundamentally change in Haiti. And it won't change. The society at large in Haiti won't change. Those in power, the corrupt, will not relinquish that power peacefully. I mean, it's been proven before. And though we'd like to think ourselves, in the 21st century, forward-thinking human beings, bloodshed is inevitable because of this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fenelon?
Hi, good evening. Thank you to each of the panelists for coming forward with all of your thoughts and ideas. So there are great minds on the panel involved in everything from education, social activism, business, and so on. The problems in Haiti are obviously complex and multidimensional. Typically on local levels, whenever problems arise that are characterized as being just as complex, multidimensional, there's a task force that's created to address that problem. That task force acts as one voice. If we had each of the panelists along with their followers working together and mix that in with solid connections to those actually on the ground in Haiti, I think this can bridge the gap and it can bring us forward that much more. It creates a force of support in the states that supports the sovereignty in Haiti. My question for each of the panelists is whether or not you would be willing to galvanize and join forces to bring people in the states together and to connect those in the states with those in Haiti so that we can build the kind of force and community that has one voice. And if you are willing to, can we hold you to that?
Thank you. Since Ms. Philippe and Mr. Louis Charles have their hands up, we'll start with Ms. Philippe, we'll start with Louis Charles and we'll follow up by Ms. Philippe.
Thank you. I've been listening to everybody's comments and questions, and as a former member of the Haitian diaspora myself, I must say there are different ways that the diaspora, the Haitian diaspora, can gain power in Haiti. Okay, you don't have to go into politics. You don't even have to go into business. Why not invest in education? I mean, honestly, if we were an organized group, why can't we open a university? Why can't we have a hospital that's funded by the diaspora, or a chain of hospitals that are funded by the diaspora in every department? Or even better, invest in my program. Like I said, I'm trying to put together a soccer project in Haiti, or soccer academy in Haiti, for the sole purpose that when you look at the Haitian soccer team that competed 2 years ago in the Gold Cup, that was a few minutes away from making it to the final, our star players were not Haitian born. I don't have a problem with that. But the only reason why they were able to compete for us is because they were not born in Haiti. So why not give those same Haitians in Haiti those same opportunities to succeed? Whether you're in New York, whether you're in Canada, invest in the Haitian in Haiti. That's the solution. You do so, you will be able, in my opinion, to gain the political power that we seek. And we need to start by investing in our own people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Louis Charles. Madame Philippe, we'll close off with you and then we'll go to closing remarks.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I just want to clarify one thing for Madame Kliska. I did not suggest there are not competence in Haiti. There are, not enough. Statistics, 85% of the brain of Haiti is outside of Haiti. What I'm saying is we need to put competence in the forefront of governance in Haiti, and we haven't seen this. Number two, to respond to the question that, the last question that they asked, how can we join forces? Yes, and this is what the march is all about. It's to gather all sort of people from all walks of lives without any political affiliation. It's open to every single person that is of Haitian or any descent, any origin, it doesn't matter. The march will ensure that together we are joining force, moving in the same direction, and establishing this big organization nationwide that will absorb all leadership that in the diaspora, in the Haitian diaspora, so that we can become one voice, create a fund that will give us money like the Jewish did, so that we can decide on our own matters of Haiti, including elections. We don't need to be having elections financed by people telling us what to do. And we are against the international dominance, and we have to bring forward our sovereignty. And that's what this march is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of our distinguished panelists. This was a very fruitful conversation. I'd like to call on our President, Gracias Charles, for closing remarks.
Wow, what a conversation. What an evening. Thank you to the panelists for these great information. Thank you to the audience for these great questions, okay? I believe if we continue taking steps towards our independence, and when I say that, I meant economically, politically, anything that would even mean relinquishing or denying foreign assistance. Okay, we need to stand up as one. We need to continue to raise our voice, raise it as one voice. So as Sabine was saying, together as one, okay, like the Jews do and a lot of other groups who have a lot of power out there, that's what they do. They stand together in one voice. So I believe we are taking steps towards coming together and speaking in one voice. This is part of it. And I believe slowly but surely, we will get the desired results. But the next step would be, if you have family in the US, send them to that rally. okay? We need to show solidarity. We need to show that we can speak as one. And that would just be the beginning. And then from there, when we all meet, we can connect. And from there, other things will evolve, right? But first step, get together and speak as one. So Soraya, I would like to pass it back on to you and thank you for the opportunity to let me speak tonight.
Not much to add after your closing remarks. I would just like to thank very much the panelists for speaking so candidly about their experiences and their passion when it comes to Haiti, and to thank the participants for their super questions. It was a great evening and a start of a conversation, and I'd like to thank everyone. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you all for coming on.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.